Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Apologetic Saturday. Just basically where we take questions every week about apologetics related or just Christianity related. If you have a question about just Christianity or what the Bible says about ... whatever, we just answer them every Saturday, and it's been a lot of fun, and I'm super excited just for where it's gone so far and what God's doing through it and how we can learn just more together and strengthen our faith through just apologetics questions and all that stuff. This week we were talking about science and Christianity part 2, because last week we did science and Christianity part 1, where we went through the perceived conflict between science and Christianity, what people say the conflict is, and why there isn't a conflict between the two, and how they can work together. And then towards the end of the video, I gave about 2 to 3 pieces or resources of just food for thought, of just things that you can think about and research, because like I said last video, those things, and you doing your research about those things on your own, could say so much more about it than I could just in like a 20-minute video, and just, all those things. But this week I wanted to kind of piggyback on that and just continue it, and I wanted to talk about just figures in science who were amazing scientists, and they're very notable and a lot of people know about them, and they made great discoveries, yet they still held to their faith. And then I wanted to talk about 3 different areas of study where we see that secular discoveries in the Bible still come together and they still confirm what Jesus said, and just the reality that God is real and Jesus is real, and that we can trust what it says. So going right into all of that, we're going to start with the 3, or there's more than 3, but I wanted to note specifically 3 that are very well known scientists. And the first one is Isaac Newton, who's the father or creator of gravity, the laws of motion, calculus, etc., etc. Gregor Mendel, who's the father of genetics, very notable for that in the biological study area. And then Galileo Galilei, who invented the telescope, and he was also an astronomer who studied the planets and everything. And these 3 men, who are very notable for their accomplishments, and we still talk about them today and still give them credit for what they discovered, were very big names in science, but they also held to their faith, and they also were very avid believers in God and just his existence and Jesus and everything of that sort. And so then I wanted to go into 3 areas of study. We talk about scientific, archaeological, and historical. And I just wanted to give like 2 or 3 pieces of just food for thought or evidence from each one, just to kind of confirm, that they can work together. So on the scientific side, I wanted to start with just the fact that we see that the universe in itself that we live in is expanding, and that has been confirmed by satellite, by scientists and everything. We see that the universe is expanding, so whatever is expanding has to begin somewhere, has to start expanding from somewhere. So the thought that the universe has been here forever or has been infinite in that argument is, put to rest. But I just want to say that the universe is expanding, so it does begin somewhere. And I also wanted to mention just the law of entropy, in that it's the thing that also came up whenever I searched it was the second law of thermodynamics, but that basically just states that as it continues, the universe is moving from a state of order to more disorder, and also showing that nothing that we see moves from a disorder to order. It only moves from order to disorder. And I wanted to point that out just to say that a lot of people will say that the universe came from nothingness into something, and that we don't see that happening anywhere else in the universe. Nothing right here is just going to spawn into something. That's not just going to happen. That's not how the laws of science work. And I wanted to point that out. And also, just to say that it had to begin somewhere. So it's the order, it was set up that way, and then just moving along. And then I wanted to go into also that we see that whatever begins to exist must have a cause. And then we also see that the universe began to exist because we see that whenever we talk about how it's expanding, so it has to begin somewhere. So therefore, the universe has a cause or a creator. And I just wanted to point that out because we can attribute that cause or creator to something or someone that has to be outside of it. So that something or someone has to be outside of time, outside of space, outside of matter. And this is, been debated among people, but that is the general consensus, that there is a creator and there is a cause, and that has to be outside of what it's creating, because nothing that is created just create something else out of it. While the things that we see that, we can feel and touch were made by something outside of it and created. They don't just put themselves together. And I just wanted to say that about just that area of study. And then let's go into the second part, which is archaeological. And I wanted to give 2 little pieces for this, even though there's so many more that we could talk about here, but I don't want to make the video too long. You can obviously look that up on your own time if you're really interested in it, but first thing that I wanted to mention was the Dead Sea Scrolls. I actually previously got a question about this, and I was glad to answer it and to give information, but I just wanted to go over what it was and why so many Christians talk about it, especially just, in apologetics, I guess. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are basically a lot of manuscripts that were found in some caves. I'm trying to think of how to say it. Manuscripts. And there's almost 1,000. I think there's 900 something. But they have copies from every single book in the Old Testament Bible except for from the book of Esther. And so, and then it has the entire copy of the book of Isaiah. Yes, which has 66 chapters, I believe, which is really long. But we see that we have those copies of those things, so and that they were preserved from then until now, that they've been preserved correctly because they've taken the translations that we have now, compared it to then. So it's, those translations haven't been lost in between, but they very closely match those things. And it's just cool to compare how many manuscripts we have with that, with 900 to 1,000, with some of the manuscripts and copies that we have of some historians that we believe to be very accurate, or autobiographies, or just famous people that we get this evidence from long ago. And we generally consider those reliable, even though the Dead Sea Scrolls have so many more copies of the Hebrew Bible and the text. So if we consider these reliable, then we should consider these reliable. And that's all that I wanted to say about that one. But going into another one that I just recently learned about, and I might say this wrong, so I'm so sorry. What is the Ketef Hinnom Scrolls? I am trying to say it right. But it's basically 2 scrolls, and I think one of them is 3 inches long. And it took them so long, maybe 3 years to unscroll just one of them, because it was just a very delicate piece of just artifact. But basically it's just 2 scrolls, and so on one of them it contains the word Yahweh, which is the name that we see for God in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible. And then also both scrolls contained the priestly benediction from Numbers 6 that we also see in our modern Bibles. Basically just a blessing from the priest from Numbers 6. And that's just, things outside of the Bible confirming that those things are true and that they have been preserved from long ago. And then the third one that I wanted to go into was just historical. And I kind of mentioned this in the last video of how Jewish and Roman historians mention Jesus in their writings, either first century, while Jesus was alive and they were watching this happen, or maybe 1 or 2 generations later, but still had relatives who saw Jesus. So they're pretty credible because they're close. And then 4 that I found, which there's more, but 4 main ones that I wanted to point out was, one was Josephus, who was the Jewish historian who mentioned Jesus; Tacitus, who was a Roman historian who mentioned him; Marabar Serapion, which is a philosopher from Syria; and then, I'll just wait. But, the 4 that I mentioned now were also mentioned in Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. He does have a book, and he also does have a video on it, which I've seen before, and it has been so helpful to me learning about all of this stuff. So I highly encourage you to go watch his stuff. Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ. I can put it in the description so you can watch it and go back and see, how to spell it and everything. But just these three historians / philosophers, basically just saying that they mentioned him in his writings. They either were Christian or weren't, and they admitted that he was a real person who walked the earth and who was crucified under Pontius Pilate. And none of these four historians say different things. Of course, they might have a certain perspective on it, but they all confirm the same people were alive and that Jesus was alive, and that he died and was resurrected, and he had the crowds of people that followed him and everything, and how they were persecuted. And then I also wanted to point out that from these 3 or 4, it's not like they're all from the same area, or same group, I guess, because it's you have a Jewish historian and a Roman one and a philosopher from Syria who's, I think that was from the Roman area. But it's not like they're all from the same area trying to prove this one thing. They have different religious backgrounds and different values and beliefs, and they still confirm the same thing. And then the 4th one that I wanted to talk about was Lucian. I think that's how you say his name. I'm really trying. But one thing, and he was just a novelist. It didn't say that he was a historian or philosopher of any sort, but it did say that he was a novelist, so I'm just going to go with that. But he was also, from that time frame. And I wanted to point out that he also talked about Jesus in his followings, and he almost doesn't come in a negative way because he was hostile to Christianity and just Christ. But him being hostile towards that doesn't mean that it's not true. In the whole big picture, we see that even though he is hostile to this, he still says the fact that Jesus was a real person and that he was crucified and that he was risen again. So even Jesus' enemies, these people who didn't necessarily agree with what he had to say, still confirmed that he was a real person, that he did walk this earth, and that he did do what he said that he would do. And then that's just what I have for today. It's kind of an abrupt ending, but we just went through the 3 scientists, and then we went through the different areas of study and just a couple, 2 or 3 things that might help you just look towards that, and seeing that science and Christianity can go together. They don't conflict with one another. They aren't at odds with one another, but they do work together. And just to note that God is the inventor of science. It's not like science invented God. God invented science. And I think that we often get that out of order. But I'm so glad that I got to talk to all of you today just about part 2. Feel free to put any topic suggestions or questions in the comments, and I will be glad to follow up with those. And I hope that you guys have an amazing week, and I will see you on Saturday.